Good afternoon. Since a few seconds it's in afternoon, I can tell you. Very much welcome to the Jarl Hjalmarson Seminar on the elections in Georgia that were held very recently. We are glad to have this opportunity to discuss the situation in the country. I won't go into that, but Diana Janse, who is the senior foreign policy advisor in the Moderate Party, and by the way, also a former Swedish ambassador to Georgia and several other places, I can tell you. She will moderate this seminar, and we are certainly very thankful for Thornike Gordadze. But I think it's better for you, Diana, to introduce him. I think you are better at that than I do.
Thank you.
So, welcome, Diana.
Thank you very much, Jarl, and welcome, and thank you to you, everybody who's here. I would like to introduce to you Dr. Thornike Gordadze, who I know well from my time in Georgia. He was first the Deputy Foreign Minister and responsible for Georgia's negotiation with the EU on the association agreement. And later on, he became the Minister for State Affairs for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, and was also the Deputy Prime Minister. And in 2012, when UNM lost elections, he left for France, which is like a half-native country, since Thornike lived there for many years. Half of your life, yes. And went back to academia, and is now the senior advisor and head of studies and research at the Institute for Higher National Defense Studies, and he's also lecturing at Paris School of International Affairs and at Sciences Po as well. It's the same. It's the same. Okay, I never understood that. Thank you for clarifying. So I will give the floor to Thornike, who will give his personal comments on the Georgian parliamentary elections that took place the 8th of October. It's not quite over yet, but still, and a bit of what it means for Georgia and the region. I will give him 20 minutes, and I'll be very firm, because I want to have some time to let you ask questions also. And I might also use my privilege to ask a few questions myself. So please, Thornike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Pre-electoral periods, so 4 years of Georgian Dream in government, there was some progress, there were some, let's say, less successful moments also. When you look on pluralism, there are more, at least at the beginning, there was the impression there is more political parties, more political groups, and the political space is not monopolized only by UNM and Georgian Dream, because there were lots of small parties that became more visible after 2012. But at the end, we saw in these elections that this political Georgian political system is still very polarized, and you have two poles. And all these small parties that they are very visible and active, they didn't go beyond the 5% threshold. Also, maybe a criticism on this multiplication of political forces is that during these 4 years, the ruling parties really tried to weaken, to do everything to make the former ruling party weak, even disappeared, using different methods for that. It didn't really work. Second point, media pluralism. Again, there was some progress, because including in the classifications of about media freedom, Georgia made some progress since 2012, but at the end, starting from 2015 and especially 2016, there were also problems that appeared, mainly concerning the main TV channel that is pro-opposition, Rustavi 2. There were a lot of different attempts to change the owners of this TV station and to make its editorial policy different. Again, thanks to international pressure, it didn't happen, but still this threat is not over. What else? The independence of the judiciary was the problem before, and still the same. There's not big changes concerning this issue. And last point maybe about economy. Concerning economy, the growth rate is much lower than before. We have now something like between 2 and 2.5% of annual growth. During these 4 years, this is the average growth rate, and that was between 6 and 12 from 2003 to 2012, with one exception, 2009, where with the huge economic crisis everywhere, Georgia also had 1 year of recession, minus 3%. So the campaign, by the local standards, the campaign was okay. So when I mean even better than, of course, much better even the Georgia's immediate neighbors. Georgia is now playing in a different division than Armenia and Azerbaijan or Russia. This is already like granted, but there still can be some criticism because. On one side, we had a huge advantage for the ruling party, including financial aspect. According to the official figures, the ruling party spent more than 60% or about 60% of all spendings of all political parties. So that means that they spent more than all other parties put together. All other parties put together 40%. Georgian Dream alone 60% of all campaign spending. Surprisingly, UNM was not the second in spendings, was the third. Second was the State for People party of this opera singer new party that was created immediately or just before elections, and UNM spent a little bit more than this small but rather active pro-Russian political party named Alliance of Patriots. Also, the ruling party has always, in this kind of situations like Georgia, a quasi-natural advantage of using administrative resource. Administrative resource, according to different calculations in Georgia, is something like around 350,000 votes, which is quite important. And UNM also was using this administrative resource, of course. And when you see the difference between the 2012 vote, when the UNM got something like 800,000 votes, and then immediately after local elections or presidential elections, the difference between these two, when UNM went from 41% to 21 or 22, the difference is the administrative resource. So in Georgia, according to the rate of participation, you have something between 17 or 22% of administrative resource, which is still quite huge. What were the main topics of the campaign? On the Georgian Dream side, the main point was we should not allow UNM to come back, because if UNM comes back, there will be more instability. There will be problems with Russia, more problems with Russia. There are still problems with Russia, but even more if they come back. And there were lots of attempts done to discredit, to demonize the UNM, including a massive publication of phone recordings without any explanation, any legal ground of this. And these phone conversations, of course, were showing the former president discussing with a few members of the UNM and talking about revolutionary scenarios, etc., etc. But nobody explained how it was made and how it was it really one conversation, 10 different conversations put together? But that was the objective. Georgian Dream did not really show 1 month before elections. There was no economic program of Georgian Dream on their website. It appeared really just before elections, and it was not even the main issue discussed, surprisingly and paradoxically, during the campaign. The main issue was if they come back, and if they come back, there will be more instability or not. What UNM did was they tried to show that there's a new UNM, that there's a renewal of the party. The first 10 persons in their list were new people. Not a single historical leader of the UNM was involved in this first 10 list. And also they tried to explain their successes during the previous terms when they were in power, and also to deconstruct all the criticism that was addressed to them, and also partially try to make also their self-criticism and mea culpa, where they admitted their mistakes and errors. But again, I think the agenda was fixed by Georgian Dream. And the UNM was trying to justify or to explain that they were not planning coup d'etat, they were not planning a revolutionary scenario, etc., etc. By the way, the state prosecution opened an investigation against UNM just a few days before elections on coup d'etat accusations. So the election day, things went more or less fine during the day. There were very few irregularities, and the international observers have noticed that, and it is considered as a stable, normal elections with very few irregularities during the vote day. I'm not talking during the electoral campaign, but there were irregularities after the stations were closed during the counting. Several major places where UNM possibly had advantages were stormed by mob, and in several places the elections were invalidated and declared as void. It cannot influence the general outcome, of course, it cannot reduce the difference, because Georgian Dream got 48% and UNM got 27%, but still there were these kind of irregularities. There were also some small-scale violence, but quite visible before elections, where the leaders of the Georgian Dream were beaten by some people who represented kind of who were brought from the capital in the provinces, and it was really similar to what was happening in Ukraine before, but that was one isolated but still very very major incident in Western Georgia. So the results: Georgian Dream got 48%, UNM 27%, and for the first time, the novelty is that we will have a openly pro-Russian political party named Alliance of Patriots in the parliament. Alliance of Patriots, after the vote was closed, almost 45 hours suspense was around this party, because officially they had something like 4.99%, and they were on the threshold of entering or not in the parliament. And everybody, most of people, including people from Georgian Dream, believe now that if they entered the parliament, there was a deal with the ruling party and with the leader of the ruling party, Mr. Ivanishvili, to let them go in the parliament, because it was really even the Central Electoral Commission, when they additioned the percentage was even higher than 100%, slightly higher. So there was some incoherence in that. I believe that in Georgia there is quite a huge, I would not say they are huge, very huge, but there is a significant part of the Georgian electorate who shares the views of this Alliance of Patriots, much more than 5%, to be honest. All pro-Russian parties put together, so this Alliance of Patriots, Mrs. Gordadze's party and few other smaller parties, like industrialists and one or two other parties, who are the splinter groups from Georgian Dream, altogether they gathered 10 or 11%. There was a study before elections that showed that 31% of Georgians now are considering that Eurasian Union is a good option for Georgia. So where are the 20 other % of people who prefer Eurasian Union to the European Union? Most probably they voted for other parties and mainly for Georgian Dream, because the huge score of Georgian Dream, more than 850,000 people, it's a huge score, includes all kind of people. Includes people who are pro-Western, who are pro-Russian. Altogether they are quite conservative. They share the ideas about mythical or invented, who knows, but about Georgian traditions should be defended. Some of them share the idea that Georgia's liberalization or westernization was too rapid. Georgian economic reforms were too liberal. And also you have people who simply are afraid of fast changes that took place under the previous government. They just want more stability and not changes. They are just afraid of changes. Personally, I'm talking on my personal behalf, I met lots of people who were dissatisfied with the Georgian dream, but the day of the elections they voted for the Georgian dream. They were criticizing Georgian dream, but they finished in voting for Georgian dream because they just don't want changes. They want to keep on the same track, and they see that the economic situation is difficult, but it's not still catastrophic, and changes and all this propaganda about UNM that if they come back there will be instability and there will be also conflict with Russia persuaded them to go and to vote in favor of Georgian dream. How many minutes I still? 2 minutes, okay, wow. What will happen? What could happen? What are the consequences of this vote? First consequence is that there will be a second round because Georgia has mixed electoral system. Almost half of the MPs are elected by the majoritarian system, and something like 50 majoritarian districts. In 50 majoritarian districts, we will have second round. But in most of these districts, Georgian Dream has such an advantage that most probably they will win and they will get the constitutional majority. For the first time, the Georgian Dream will have a constitutional majority, and that is something that makes many people, not only UNM, but the whole Georgian NGOs, other political parties, mainly pro-Western political parties that didn't enter the parliament, very, very cautious and very nervous about that, because just the second day after the election results were published, several leaders of the Georgian Dream made statements about the need to change the way the president is elected in Georgia. They proposed to the president to be elected by the parliament and not by the electors. The changes of making constitutional the definition of the family as a unity of a male with a female. That is something that was not really needed in Georgia because nobody seriously considers at this stage to introduce same-sex marriage in Georgia, but this is something that is politically used to mobilize, because most of Georgians today believe that this is something that should be defended, and then it should not be questioned. And third consequence is also to a very quick consequence that could happen is to transfer the parliament from Kutaisi to the capital, Tbilisi. So now the second round is that many political parties that were before even in the coalition of the Georgian Dream, like Republicans, or this new party of the opera singer, the State for Power, now they call to vote for UNM because they are afraid of the constitutional majority of the Georgian Dream. Maybe one additional point that helped these people to make such a call is that there was a huge discussion inside the UNM about going in the parliament or boycotting the parliament, because a part of inside the UNM, there's let's say a group of people, including the former president, who believed that the scale of the falsification was so huge that UNM should not recognize the results and should not go in the parliament, because the Georgian Dream will have the majority, a constitutional majority, and by definition one person, Mr. Ivanishvili, will get constitutional majority, plus this pro-Russian party. So UNM should not go in this parliament that will have zero power. That was the position of Saakashvili and few other members of the UNM. But there was a meeting 2 or 3 days ago in the party, the political council, and the decision went against Saakashvili and against his close allies in the party. And that, for the first time, has demonstrated that in Georgia there is a party that can go against the will of its historical leader and the personality that still pretty much influenced and influences the party, and that gives some hope for other political groups and civil society in Georgia that for the first time we will have a party, a political party, which is entirely pro-Western. There is no doubt about their geopolitical orientation, which is now going beyond this very centralized and personalized model of political parties that is in Georgia. And Georgian Dream is also very personalized and very much dependent on the one person, which is Mr. Ivanishvili. And now we see a party that has 27%, which is not a bad result, which is trying to become a modern kind of Western kind of a political party. It's not over, of course. I think there will be other frictions inside. But at this stage, many people who were afraid of going and helping UNM to get votes will vote for them just to avoid the overwhelming power and concentration of power in the hands of Georgian Dream. I will stop here, Diana.
Thank you very much, Thornike. So we've gone from a situation then, if I take the opportunity to ask the first question, we've gone from a situation where we had UNM dominating parliament in 2012 to losing elections, then handing over power to a Georgian Dream-led coalition. It's a bit confusing because it was a Georgian Dream coalition, but also the Georgian Dream Party. They ruled for 4 years. In the end, the coalition split up, and what remained were part of it, but two of the parties left the coalition.
More than two. There was
Free Democrats and Republicans.
There were also smaller pro-Russian industrialists left.
Okay,
and
they also left. I lost that. And now we're moving into a situation where we maybe will have a constitutional majority for what is not any longer a coalition, but a party. So my first question would be, is the threshold to parliament too high?
You mean 5%?
Yes.
No, I think the main problem, according to my observations, is not the 5% threshold. The main problem is majoritarian districts, because in Georgia, if there was only representative election, there would be much more parties represented, or there will be a much fairer division of the seats, because with 47% or 48% of votes, when you have, and you can have like 75% of the seats in the parliament. And also the participation was not that high. It was only 51% of participation. That shows that the system is not very fair. This is not only in Georgia. It happens in different countries. In my country, in my second country, France, we have totally majoritarian system. We don't have, and some people are very happy because otherwise we will have Front National having I don't know maybe the biggest representation in the parliament. And people are very happy with that, but at the same time this is also playing against the system, because the main argument of Front National is to say that we have 25% of votes and we have only 2 or 3 MPs, which is not fair, and the system is unfair. So I think the main problem is majoritarian districts, and there were discussions to abolish majoritarian districts or to make several, because the argument in favor of majoritarian system was that the regions are not well represented, and lots of politicians come from Tbilisi, which is true, and maybe also unfair. But there was a proposition to make regional proportional lists. And then this proposal was rejected, because every government wants to keep this majoritarian system, because this is something that amplifies their victories usually. And UNM was doing the same, exactly the same. The UNM did not abolish the majoritarian system because they hoped that this is something that really helps to increase the domination of the ruling party.
One more question before I open the floor, and that is the prospects of a constitutional majority in a still quite young and fragile democracy as the Georgian. What does it mean? You mentioned maybe the abolition of the election of president by popular vote and the move of the parliament, and but what, in the broader perspective, if you zoom out a bit, what can it entail? Is it the end of democracy?
I hope it's not the end of democracy in Georgia, because Georgia is still a country where I cannot imagine a Central Asian kind of, the overwhelming domination of one personality or the ruling party. This is not possible because the country is much more diverse. There is no resource comparable to that. But there are lots of questions and fears about this concentration of power in the hands of basically of one person who is even not in the realm of the constitution or institutions. Mr. Ivanishvili is the informal leader of the Georgian dream and also of the country, and he doesn't have any political or institutional seat. He's not even, nobody can ask the responsibility to Mr. Ivanishvili because he doesn't held any official position. So this is something that worries many people, and also including the international community and the representations, embassies in Georgia, and also the fact that UNM decided to enter the parliament is an extremely positive thing, because otherwise the criticism of the government would happen outside of the parliament, and that could have provoked in the future more could provoke more tensions outside of the parliament and more instability. I think they made a wise decision. They still, even if they cannot prevent constitutional majority for Georgian, they will have the opportunity to criticize and to be vocal and visible. And that's what I also advised one of my friends who was complaining about that. I told, but you will have 4 years. If you really want to go and leave the parliament, you will have 4 years, and if there's some such decisions that really kills democracy, then you can move and go out. If this is it should not be, the timing should be different, not refusing the results that were more or less okay, and everybody recognized that the small irregularities didn't really change the whole image, and nobody would understand boycotting the parliament. And I think that was a wise decision. And now the coming 4 years will be very difficult, and also international community should, because the pressure works on Georgia. This is not Russia. The pressure doesn't work on Russia or work on a sometimes very strange way, but in Georgia international pressure really works, because it's a small country and we need so much Europe and the West that even sometimes a small criticism can have and friendly criticism can have an effect on Georgia.
Thank you very much, and I agree with you. I think it was a wise decision. First, I think 27% is not a bad election result at all. It's really what the main political parties in Sweden managed to gather. So, if you put it in perspective, it's not bad. And also, I think leaving parliament because you don't win the elections is
just to
really
show the score
of the game.
The political council of the party, you have 60 members, and the vote was published, and there were 52 pro. Yeah. Going in the parliament, 8 against.
Yeah, and a few abstentions.
Well, maybe, okay, there was maybe 48, 47, 49.
No, it was a full majority.
Yeah,
really.
This was a...
Really. Okay, so I will open the floor for questions. Someone has a microphone here, I know. There's a question over there. Thank you. And please introduce yourself.
Oh, Larsson, retired but still thinking.
Some people start thinking after they retire.
You're putting a lot of thoughts into my mind, and one of these is the proposition that Georgia was subjugated for decades by the Soviet Union, and at the same time my sense is that the Georgians poked their finger at the dumb Russians in the Kremlin all the time and did their own thing at home. And couldn't they do their own thing at home once more, just trying to be subservient to the Kremlin in a way? I mean, saying we love the Eurasian Union, but at the same time keeping on with their reforms and getting that stability that people seem to be craving for. I mean, you live in that very bad neighborhood. And I mean, the West and the Europe and United States, they are not very trustworthy, are they? Thank you.
Yeah. And if I could tag along to that question, I think it was
Yeah,
interesting.
you can.
What would be what is the reactions
No,
of Russia to this?
I think, so your observation about being auxiliary or subservient of the empire, that was the case of Georgia during the centuries, not only with the Russians, but also with the Ottomans or Persians, etc. But you cannot really call it a successful experience, first. And second, I think in the 21st century or even in the 20th century, people have different ambitions. And Georgia's choice and Georgia's population's choice today is still to go in the direction of Europe and Euro-Atlantic community. And we have paid a very high price for that. We have we lost 20% of our territory for that. And still, despite that, you ask people, I said 31%. That was the highest point since several years. It was much less before. Now the Russian soft power is much more effective. They are much more active in Georgia than several years ago. There was much stronger monitoring before against all these transfers of money and Russian propaganda and Russian financed small NGOs and groups. Now they are much more present in Georgia and they do their propaganda, but still 31%, you have 69 on the other side. This is a huge majority. And the Georgians will not accept, and I'm sure also that Russia cannot give the stability and the wealth and good life. This is a myth. Russia cannot offer that even to their population. So why Georgians would go and would accept that? Look what happened in Ukraine. This is something so obvious. And Russia's behavior now in international affairs, and especially in Syria, you cannot really, if you have choice, if you don't have choice like our Armenian friends who lost their possibility of making their choice, and they felt under Russian influence. But even them, I am sure if they have a slightest opportunity, they will not choose Russia. Belarus is trying not to depend on Russia. Belarus, you know the political system in Belarus and the president, everything. If they have an opportunity, they will do everything to reduce Russia's influence on them. I don't see any country which would choose Russia today voluntarily. Countries who are now with Russia are with Russia because they have no other option. And I don't think Georgians will decide themselves by their own will to go and to replay the same equation that existed under the Soviet Union or under the Tsarist empire. Do you want to add something, maybe?
Next question, please.
And again, the people are not naive anymore about Europe and the US. They don't believe that they will come on the white horse and they will liberate on Georgia. But you know, when you have difficult times, and now it's difficult times, the West is not as active, as proactive as before. But people say, okay, we have to wait, we have to resist, we have to keep ourselves alive, and then the good times will come. This is the thing that prevails now among the Georgian elites, at least.
Håkan?
Thank you. Håkan Tribell, I work with Diana. You were talking about the decline in economic growth over the past few years, and I would like, if it's possible for you to comment on sort of why is that so, and from the perspective of what do people think about that, not perhaps the economics, but the politics of that. Thank you.
Georgia's economic growth before, I mean, starting from 2004, was mainly due to the liberalization of the economy and the reforms, sometimes very painful reforms, socially speaking, because maybe one of the decisive facts that influenced the vote in 2012 was that despite the reforms and the global image that was much better of the economy, there were still people who lived in very diverse economic environment and situation. So they couldn't see improvement in their households and in their everyday life. So they voted against UNM for that. Now I don't think that their situation has dramatically improved. The economic growth is smaller because of different reasons, because of the regional also situation. You don't have economic growth in Russian crisis. You have crisis in Ukraine. You have crisis or stagnation in Europe. So this is also influencing Georgia's economy, and also these reforms are not as bold as before. There is no serious backtracking. I would not say that, but still it's more it's less bold, and it's not really advancing as fastly as before. And social issues remain, and you have all these people who were very critical, ordinary people, very critical of Georgian dream, they would point on social issues. But it appeared that they didn't vote against the Georgian dreams. So it's because also, as I said, this idea of instability will come back. They were afraid, and they decided not to change the force that is ruling ruling Georgia today.
There was a lot of talks when Georgian Dream took power in 2012 that they would do something to give energy and life into the agriculture sector that was completely neglected, I dare to say, during UNM times. Has anything happened in that?
Not really. There was a small improvement in agriculture, mainly thanks to the end of the Russian embargo. There was a boost to Georgian winemaking and mineral waters and other food stuff, but again, that has also that makes Georgian economy. This is positive, but it makes Georgian economy more dependent on Russia. And if tomorrow Russia decides to block again, so there will be another crisis in these particular segments of the economy, because Russia can decide tomorrow that I don't know, Swedish potatoes are bad for health, and they could stop it for political reasons. It's the same in Georgian case. So you cannot really trust Russian market for that. And all these promises, there were even more promises in other sectors, in banking sectors. There were promises that the rates, interest rates will be zero. It didn't happen. There were lots of these kind of promises that didn't happen, and also Georgian currency lost a lot. And I was checking yesterday and today, even after the elections, after the first round, the National Bank tried to support during the election campaign the currency, and now they cannot anymore. And so all of a sudden, the lari Georgian currency starts to fall, and it will be even more after the second round, I think. So the economic situation is not really improving, I could say.
Any other questions? Jarl?
Thank you. Jarl Hjalmarson, chair of the foundation. Just continue on this economic track. I think the big difference, of course, was the growth rate during UNM compared to Georgia Dream, from more than 8% or something like that.
Average, yeah, it was between 7 and 8.
Like that, which is essentially what a country like Georgia should have. I mean, catching up certainly means that you should have a far higher growth rate in the economy than the 2.5% you mentioned. Particularly, I would say, since you have. Unlike what most people think, we have a situation today, 2016, where more than half of the world's population live in fast-growing countries, more than 5%, practically all in Asia, which is not that far from Georgia, by the way. I think it is well possible to go back to those figures for a country like Georgia, that is in a catching up. A well-educated population being repressed during the Soviet time when it comes to the economy, and catching up is possible. And that is why I'm a bit surprised why UNM hasn't focused much more on the economy. Perhaps you tried and didn't succeed, I don't know, but certainly that is something that usually affects most ordinary people, that you want to get out of poverty, you want to see your children be better off than you are. And particularly since you have a close neighborhood where the economy is going backwards, in Russia, in Azerbaijan, for example, also in Ukraine, I guess. I don't know about Armenia, but it's not going well there. No. So in that sense, I thought it would be better. And the other, if I go to the more geopolitics, I see in Central Asia, where Russia is rapidly losing its influence because of its shrinking economy, and particularly, of course, China. China is increasing influence. China's economy is now 10 times bigger than Russia's. So Russia is rapidly losing out because of its economic muscle is so weak. So from that point of view, I think that could also be a factor to point to in your future policy. I mean, there is no future in a Eurasian Union with high tariffs. I mean, you will be captive to Russian economy, because high tariffs is just a colonial arrangement. It's not like EU, we have low tariffs, which means that outside competition is welcome.
Yeah, I totally agree, but on coming back on this growth rate and why it was not advertised and why UNM did not really insist on that. They insisted, but this growth rate, again, had a strange impact in Georgian population, because when you start from scratch and you have some sectors of economy really booming, and you see a group of people and some new emerging business class, but Georgia being a small country and not a rich country, not all the sectors really benefited from these reforms. And you had quite a huge part of the population who at least had the impression, everybody made some profit, this is sure, but they had the impression that they were, the beneficiary were others, and these others were not the majority. And that's why insisting on this growth rate, they would say, okay, perfect, we see these nice hotels and buildings and roads are much better and we have 24-hour electricity, but at the same time you have people who are not, who are much richer than before, and others are almost the same. So the degree of frustration is even higher for some people than when everybody was poor and there was no electricity and everybody was in deep trouble. Then, okay, everybody is in trouble. Now you have some people who live really improved their lives and they are okay, and others who remain as before. This is one of the negative, the other side of this economic growth. And second issue is that Georgian Dream promised and is using that as their success, that there is less pressure on business, because under Saakashvili, okay, the businesses were booming, but at the same time he was putting pressure on business to get finances for his pet projects, like I don't know, infrastructure projects, etc. But at the same time, growth rate was higher. Now the business community is quite happy with the new government, because there's less pressure. Nobody asks them to participate in these big projects, so their attitude towards the Georgian Dream government is okay. They are not against Georgian Dream. And before elections, Ivanishvili met this huge business people, the main business people in Georgia, and they were quite loyal. I wouldn't say they applauded, but they were quite loyal. And Ivanishvili even asked them to ask their employees to vote in a right way in front of the cameras. This is paradox, because the economic growth is lower, but these business decision makers don't feel pressure from the state, less pressure, and they are okay. But there is a question that emerges where the money goes, because basically they are not spending this extra money for big projects, but where is this money then? Nobody knows.
If I can add to that, I think one part of the UNM policies that really made many poor people uncomfortable was the privatization efforts. So when UNM took over, the coffers were really empty. The state were in shambles, had nothing but all the state assets from communist times. So there was a huge privatization effort where a lot of precious buildings, etc., were more or less given away. They were given away because the investors promised to invest. So instead of having a hotel falling apart, you could buy it for a lorry, and in return promised to invest this and that many millions of dollars. But then came the financial crisis, and investors just disappeared. So I think it was very difficult sell to sort of explain why you give away a huge building in central downtown Tbilisi for a lorry and then nothing happens. So I think that's also important to understand. I see the privatization as completely necessary, that process, but it was the perception of it came out really, really bad in the end.
In a country with the average GDP per capita that is between $4,000 and $5,000, it's very difficult to, the social issues are much more important than in a country where you have, I don't know, 30 or 35,000 euros per capita GDP, where other issues can motivate the electorate. So that's still the problem in Georgia, and that's why. And paradoxically, I'm surprised why there is no left-wing party, serious one in Georgia, who would, who would try to defend social rights.
It's also quite a large chunk of the population. I can't remember if around 20% that live under poverty.
Yeah, I don't have exact figure, but it's probably maybe even a little bit more. 20s for sure. Yeah.
Challenge. Yes, please.
Thank you, Ambassador of Georgia, Gordadze.
Yeah, welcome to Stockholm. Welcome to Sweden. I know you just appointed.
So
good to see you here.
What I wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much for very comprehensive report. The important thing for Georgia now is that there were parliamentary elections, and they were held in very fair, free, and peaceful environment. If you do not take into consideration some violations which are under the investigation, and I cannot give you now exact answer on it. But the question, it's maybe question and respond at the same time. For example, when we speak about pro-Russian, say, I am Georgian from the beginning. I born in Georgia, I lived in Georgia, and I know Georgia. And I'm at the very beginning of our state independence, and I do not think that the Georgian people want to be in hands of any, and in particular in Russia. If we wanted, so we would not have a referendum in '91 when we separated from Soviet Union. We got an independence after the referendum when absolute majority of population supported this idea. And when we speak about pro-Russian parties, I can say that I would agree with some of them. For example, about Gordadze. She openly says that she is pro-Russian, but about the rest, maybe some of these parties, I do not belong to the supporters of that parties. But anyway, some of them just speak about the cooperation on the restoring of some relations, but not going to Russia. Because my question, for example, about Russia is where Russia is moving itself. Is it the right way? So I think no. So we will not go with this alliance. And speaking about our will and our Euro-Atlantic wishes, again I come back to some kind of referendum which was held in 2008 and where absolute majority of Georgia expressed their will to continue this way. And it is irreversible. So we will never get to another. The only way for Georgia is to join European and Euro-Atlantic structures. And we are on the way. And we have some success there. And you know about it, the last decision about visa liberalization. Now about Parliament, I just wanted to about majoritarian system, which was mentioned here. Now, the ruling party on the last sessions of the parliament, they promised to discuss this issue for the next parliament, so that this system will not exist for the next parliamentary elections. It means 2020. We have to wait. And I, as a person, as a citizen, fully support the idea when United National Movement joined Parliament, they are going to participate. And there's another hope that the majority says that we will not take any important decision without taking into consideration the opinion of minority. So we have to wait. It seems to me that we are on the right way, and we will get some. We can discuss many issues regarding our past. I mean, 2003, 2012, it was too painful. And from my opinion, we cannot justify it with any reforms when we speak about human beings and his fate. And about the economy, about Russia's involvement, because most of our enterprises, we are given to Russia exactly in that period. So there are some questions. So maybe we will discuss these issues additionally. We will meet another seminar.
Do you want to comment?
Oh, yeah, you have to be optimistic, Mr. Ambassador, I understand. And I also want to be optimistic. Maybe the remark on who is pro-Russian in Georgia and what is to be pro-Russian. Of course, the people who openly say that they are pro-Russian, they are Gordadze, but you also forgot the Alliance of Patriots, who are also openly, at least against the West and European Union and the US and Euro-Atlantic integration openly. You have also some people who are like industrialists and few smaller parties who also openly criticized Georgia's Western choice. But this is not the only segment of the population that is pro-Russian, because when some people say that Russia and the West is the same, this is exactly what Russia wants. Russia understands perfectly that you cannot, after the war with Georgia and the occupation, you cannot say that Russia is great and Georgia should join Russia. It's very difficult in Georgia. When you say that, you are already politically dead, or you are marginalized at least. So another option is to say, oh, they are all the same. They are as bad as Russia. And we are not pro-Western, we are not pro-Russian, we are pro-Georgian. What does it mean? For me, being pro-Georgian is being pro-Western. I understand that. I cannot, because there is not such a choice of being Georgian and against everybody. Like a small country of 4 million inhabitants cannot be cannot be alone. That means alone without Europe and US, and that automatically means that you're becoming influenced by Russia. So we should reflect more what is being pro-Russian in Georgia. This is something more insidious, less visible than the people who openly say that they are pro-Russian. What else? There was some other observations, but I don't remember. But
about Parliament and the situation in Parliament. About the situation
oh yeah,
in
so
Parliament.
let's hope. I hope you are right, and there will be discussions, and there will be no unilateral decisions on these issues that were mentioned by the leaders of the Georgian Dream after elections. The next day, that there will be the change in president's election, etc. It is not done yet, and I hope you are right, and I hope we will see these developments later.
We have time for one more question, if there is one. No more question? Then I would like to warmly thank you, Thornike, for this enlightening 1-hour expose of Georgia, and I think we can conclude that there is hope, and as the Russians say, поживем, увидим.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you for inviting me, and I don't know, see you next time somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.